Welcome, come on in.
Thank you, sir. It's so cold out.
The relentless winter wind sliced through the thin shawl of a young woman named Clara as she trudged along the frozen, desolate road toward nowhere. Every door in the frontier town of Bitter Creek had been slammed in her face after cruel eyes branded her a thief and a woman of loose morals. She clutched her empty stomach, remembering the milliner's false accusation that had cost her the only decent seamstress job she could find in the territory. Her shoes were worn through to the stockings, and the biting cold gnawed at her toes as she stumbled behind the livery stable to collapse in the snow. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer that the end would come swiftly, because she simply had nowhere left to go among the living. Just as the warmth of unconsciousness began to soothe her frozen limbs, a firm but gentle hand grasped her shoulder and shook her awake. She opened her eyes to see a tall rancher with a weathered face and deep, concerned eyes kneeling beside her with a lantern in the snow. His name was Gideon Hale, a quiet widower who had been checking on his horse and had spotted her crumpled form from the barn door. Without a single question about her past or her ragged appearance, he lifted her as if she weighed nothing and draped his heavy coat around her. She tried to protest, but her teeth chattered so violently that she could only manage a weak sob against his warm woolen shoulder. He carried her through the swirling snow toward a small, sturdy cabin that glowed with the inviting light of a crackling hearth and oil lamps. After setting her gently on a bench by the fire, he poured steaming water into a basin and handed her a clean cloth to wash her face. She looked around the modest, tidy room and felt a pang of longing for the kind of home she had not known since her parents died of fever. Gideon stirred a pot of venison stew hanging over the fire, and the rich aroma of meat and herbs made her dizzy with desperate hunger. He ladled a generous portion into a thick bowl, added a hunk of fresh cornbread, and then he said the words that cracked her heart wide open. "Come home and eat supper." He spoke simply, as if she were already family, and this meal was the most natural thing in the world. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she lifted the spoon with trembling hands, and the first warm bite brought a sob of pure relief from her soul. Gideon sat across the table, sipping coffee and asking no prying questions, just letting her eat until she finally pushed the empty bowl away. She told him her name was Clara Vance, and she braced herself for the inevitable recoil when he recognized the name and the scandal attached to it. He merely nodded slowly and said that he had learned long ago that a person's character was not written in gossip, but in their eyes and actions. Clara blurted out that she had not stolen a single spool of thread, and that the milliner's son had framed her after she rejected his forceful advances. Gideon's jaw tightened with quiet anger, and he assured her that she would never have to fear that man again while she lived under his roof. He offered her a small, clean room off the kitchen that had once been his late wife's sewing space, now dusty and waiting for new purpose. That night, Clara slept beneath a hand-stitched quilt and wept again, not from sorrow, but from the overwhelming discovery that kindness still existed in the world. The next morning, she insisted on milking the cow and scrubbing the floors before the sun had even fully risen, desperate to earn her keep. Gideon tried to stop her, but she told him that work was the only way she knew to show gratitude when words felt too fragile to hold her heart. Within a week, her skilled needle had mended every torn shirt and darned every sock, and the cabin began to hum with her quiet, diligent presence. She learned that Gideon had lost his wife and infant daughter 3 years ago in a cholera outbreak that had left him hollow and reclusive. The townsfolk thought him strange and unfriendly, but Clara saw a gentleman who talked to his horses and fed stray cats on the porch. One afternoon, she gathered courage and asked him why he had rescued a disgraced stranger without knowing if the rumors were true or false. He set down his whittling knife and replied that he had seen a soul just as broken as his own, and that supper was the smallest gift he could offer. Clara felt a rush of emotion that she dared not name, but she poured it into baking molasses cookies that filled the cabin with sweetness and comfort. As winter melted into spring, she planted a kitchen garden with seeds Gideon had stored, coaxing life from the cold ground with patient, loving hands. The ranch began to thrive because Clara noticed small things, like a calf that needed special care and a fence that would fail in the next big storm. Neighbors who once shunned her started to visit, drawn by the delicious jams and breads she made from the flourishing berry bushes she transplanted from the hills. Gideon found himself laughing again, a rusty sound at first, then freer, as Clara told him funny stories about stubborn goats and clumsy prairie chickens. One night, a traveling circuit preacher stopped by and recognized Clara's name, starting to question her presence there with a harsh, accusatory tone. Gideon stood up, squared his broad shoulders, and calmly informed the preacher that his supper table had one rule: no judgment, only grace and nourishment. The preacher, shamed by the quiet strength in Gideon's voice, accepted a bowl of stew and later admitted that he had misjudged the situation entirely. Clara watched Gideon defend her honor and realized that the home she had craved was not a place, but the steadfast loyalty of this humble man. That evening, after the preacher left, she found Gideon on the porch, gazing at the stars, and she sat beside him with her heart pounding wildly. She confessed that she had nowhere left to go when he found her, but now she could not imagine going anywhere that did not include him. Gideon turned to her, his eyes glistening, and admitted that the cabin had been a tomb until her laughter had resurrected every corner with new life. He took her hands, rough from honest work, and asked if she would do him the profound honor of becoming his wife and permanent supper partner. She said yes with a joyful cry that echoed across the moonlit pasture, and the sleepy calves stirred as if they too were celebrating the union. The wedding was a humble affair held beneath a budding cottonwood tree, with only the loyal barn cats and a gentle old horse as witnesses. Clara wore a simple white dress she had sewn from flour sacks, and Gideon thought she looked more radiant than any bride in a fancy cathedral. News of their marriage reached Bitter Creek, and the milliner's son, now a disgraced drunkard, tried to spread fresh lies about Clara's past again. This time, however, a dozen women whom Clara had helped with sewing and kindness marched into the mercantile and publicly denounced his slanderous wickedness. The truth finally prevailed, and Clara received a written apology from the town council, which she graciously accepted but never needed for her own sense of worth. She poured her energy into turning the ranch into a modestly prosperous enterprise, selling her jams, pickles, and knitted goods at the county fair. Gideon built her a proper sewing room with a large window overlooking the wildflower meadow, fulfilling a dream she had never dared to voice. Together, they expanded the cabin, adding a comfortable sitting room where they hosted lonely travelers, lost cowboys, and anyone in need of a hot meal. Their table became legendary throughout the region, and the phrase "come home and eat supper" was known as the warmest invitation in the whole frontier. When their first child, a son they named Hope, was born, Clara whispered to him that a bowl of stew and a kind word could save a life. Gideon held his small family close and reflected that the snowy night he found Clara was the moment God had given him a second chance at living. Years later, a young woman fleeing a similar false scandal arrived at their gate, trembling and hollow-eyed, and Clara rushed out to meet her immediately. She did not ask for explanations or references. She simply wrapped the stranger in a quilt and said the same words that had once resurrected her own soul. "Come home and eat supper," Clara declared, and Gideon watched with pride as his wife became the rescuer, passing forward the gift that had started everything. Their homestead became a sanctuary where broken hearts were mended with warm bread, honest labor, and the unshakable belief that everyone deserved a place at the table. The simple invitation that began with a lonely rancher and a desperate girl became the founding legacy of a Kefkamekemes family rooted in compassion, stew, and cornbread. If this story of redemption and homemade supper warmed your heart, please like this video, subscribe to West Old Stories Official, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We want to know what small kindness changed your life. Because every story of hope reminds us that a single invitation can rewrite a destiny forever.